Chairman of Naresuan University Council, Nobel Laureate, Representative of Taungam Network, Administrator of Academic Institutions, Chief Executive Officer of Private Sectors, Honorable guests, dear participants, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 4th ASEAN Event Series on Bridget's Dialogues Towards a Culture of Peace, hosted by Bridget's Dialogues Towards a Culture of Peace, International Peace Foundation and Naresuan University, and co-organized by the Taungam Network. I am Assistant Professor Dr. Pasawan Korakochamat, Assistant to the President of Naresuan University. And the lady next to me is Dr. Chayanin Pratumsud, Assistant to the Dean of the Faculty of Public Health at Naresuan University. Today we both are very much honored to perform as the MC for the great event.
Certainly. Thank you very much, Dr. Pasawan, for such a kind introduction. In this year, ladies and gentlemen, our event is honored by Professor Sir Harold W.Kroto, a 1996 Nobel laureate for chemistry at Florida State University, USA. His world-changing discovery of the Buckminster fullerene and the related class of the molecules fullerenes had aroused excitement throughout the scientific arena. His keynote speech on this important lecture is Education, the Basis for Peace and the Key to an Enlightened Global Community.
Dr. Chianin, what are the Taungam networks?
Right, the Taungam networks are networks of colleges of education comprised of 8 campuses around Thailand, plus 4 campuses around Bangkok. Later, they were officially granted university status by His Majesty King Bhumibol Adulyadej.
And for this event, we have 5 members of Taungam networks joining us. They are Naresuan University, Srinakharinthara Virod University, Mahasarakam University, Thaksin Universities, and Burapha University. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we would like to take you to the conferment of an honorary doctorate in chemistry on Professor Sir Harold W.Kroto, who was awarded the 1996 Nobel Prize in Chemistry.
First of all, may I take this opportunity to invite the following honorable people to be on the stage. First, Professor Dr. Krasea Chanawong, Chairman of Naresuan University Council.
Second, General Dr. Siri Tiwapan, Deputy Chairman of Naresuan University Council.
Third, Emeritus Professor Dr. Bunchaw Pongpanit, Honorable Committee of Naresuan University Council.
Next, Associate Professor Dr. Warakorn Samkose, Honorable Committee of Naresuan University Council.
Next, Associate Professor Dr. Sujinda Jemsipong, Committee of Naresuan University Council.
Next, Dr. Suchat Meungkao, Committee and Secretary of Naresuan University Council.
Professor Dr. Sujin Jinayon, President of Naresuan University.
Professor Dr. Somyot Praptiang, Dean of the Faculty of Science at Naresuan University. And the last person we would like to invite to be seated on the stage is, ladies and gentlemen, please give a big round of applause to welcome our honorary doctorate and Nobel laureate, Professor Sir Harold W.Kroto. Please, Professor.
At this auspicious moment, may we take this opportunity to invite Professor Dr. Grasa Chanawong, Chairman of Naresuan University, to be at the podium in order to read the citation for Professor Sir Harold W.Kroto, please. Mr. Chairman.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great honor to be standing before you today to welcome the great people of the world, our professor, our distinguished guests, and the one that we are going to have a conferment of doctorate degree for him. Professor Sir Harold W.Kroto. Professor Sir Harold W.Kroto was awarded the 1996 Nobel Prize in Chemistry for his discoveries of carbon compounds and the carbon-60 molecule, known as the Buckminster fullerene. His path to become a Nobel laureate in chemistry began to pave in his early years through work experiences, play, and study. He spent his school vacations in his father's small balloon factory, repairing machinery and doing inventory using scales, log tables, and a slide rule. His favorite toy was a mechano set, a set of erector set which require mechanical dexterity. And at Boston Secondary School, he showed an aptitude for chemistry, physics, and mathematics. Later, he attended the University of Sheffield, where he obtained a BA honors degree in chemistry and a PhD in molecular spectroscopy. After graduation, he left England for North America, where he conducted research at the National Research Council in Canada and the Bell Laboratory in the United States. Returning to England, he taught and conducted research at the University of Sussex for 37 years and became a full professor in 1985 and Royal Society Research Professor in 1991. In 1996, Professor Kroto was knighted for his contribution to chemistry. Professor Sir Harold W.Kroto's discoveries of carbon-60 has gone far beyond the disciplines of chemistry and is influencing physics, material science, astronomy, and nanoscience. Since 2004, Professor Kroto has held the Francis Epps Professorship in Chemistry at Florida State University in the United States, where he is conducting research in nanoscience. Professor Kroto's illustrious career has impacted not only research in the science, but through his Vega Science Trust, established 1995, and through his work with GeoSet, a global education outreach for science, engineering, and technology project. He is supporting science education worldwide with the production of science films for network television. The program on the Vega Free website have been designed by Professor Kroto and seen in over 165 countries. Professor Sir Harold W.Kroto has received numerous awards, including 37 honorary doctorate degrees from universities around the world. In addition, he has been honored as a Fellow of the Royal Society of London and Foreign Associate of the U.S. National Academies of Science. He is the recipient of many recognitions, such as International Prize for New Materials from the American Physical Society in 1992, the Italgas Prize for Innovation in Chemistry in 1992, the Royal Society of Chemistry of the Longstaff Medal in 1993, the Hewlett-Packard Europhysics Prize in 1994, the American Carbon Society Medal for Achievements of Carbon Science in 1997, the Faraday Award for the scientist who has contributed most to further public communications of science, engineering, and technology in the United Kingdom in 2001, and the Copley Medal in 2004. In recognition of Professor Sir Harold W.Kroto's groundbreaking work in chemistry, his continuing research in nanoscience, and his abiding commitment to science education, Nareswaran University is honored to present Professor Sir Harold W.Kroto an honorary doctorate in science in the fields of chemistry. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for such a wonderful and touching citation.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to invite Professor Dr. Sujin Jinayon, the President of Nareswaran University, to confer the honorary doctorate in chemistry on Professor Sir Harold W.Kroto. Please, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Mr. President.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, may I take this opportunity to invite Professor Dr. Somyot Plaptiang, Dean of the Faculty of Science, Nareswaran University, to present the academic gown to Professor Sir Harold W.Kroto. Please, Professor.
Thank you very much, Professor Somyot.
Ladies and gentlemen, please give another big round of applause to our honorary doctorate in chemistry, Professor Sir Harold W.Kroto.
And now may I have an honor to invite Professor Kroto to give us the acceptance speech. Please, Professor.
Well, it's obviously a great honor. And what can I say, to come to Thailand and receive this but as Henry VIII said to his wives, I shan't keep you very long. It's interesting to think about honours. As you know, that we have honours also in England, and I received a knighthood. I thought this was very strange because one day I went downstairs and Margaret had gone out early because normally she gets the mail. And I sat on the bottom of the stairs opening this envelope which said, the Prime Minister has it in mind to advise the Queen to offer you a knighthood. And there were two little boxes underneath, tick yes or no. So my pen hovered for a microsecond over no, to show you how thin the veneer of my Republican sort of tendency was. So I obviously accepted this knighthood. I thought, actually I was a bit surprised. I thought some friends of mine were playing a trick on me. I thought they probably sent me this letter to say, just to think that that was it. But then I received a letter from someone who also had a knighthood to say, there is no downside to a K. That's the knighthood begins with a K, believe it's not in English. And I discovered that is correct. I discovered my friends, they were pleased for me. Those who didn't know me, many of you people here, were impressed. And my enemies were a bit pissed off with this. So there was no downside to it. So honours are very interesting, and they are something that I value very, very much. And coming here, and I must thank you for it. I think it's, I don't realize what to say about this, that now I've come to an age of excessive youth, that I see that some young people in the audience here, to say that many of you are at university, and I think it's a fantastic place to be. It's a place where you can explore all facets of your creative potential, not just in the subject of your degree, but to use that opportunity because you're very fortunate to go to university. When I went to university, and my wife Margaret, who's here, less than 10% of the British children went to university. Also, I think you'll see that I think in today's newspaper there were discussions about internet courses, and these are very, very important. However, for me at university, one of the most important aspects was to link with other students of my age group. The friends that I made at university, in fact, I sort of met my wife there. The friends that we had at that time, a period of 3 years as an undergraduate and 3 years as a PhD student, were the most important period in my life, and I think in my wife's. Even this morning, just this morning, I got an email from my old tennis partner at Sheffield University. And it was about Andy Murray losing to Djokovic. And it said, Jack, who's now living in New Zealand, and we visited them, we have friends all over the world, most of them during that period said, well, at least Andy won the first point. So, obviously for many young people, the internet will be a major contribution to their education. But you, the students here in this audience who are at this university, Naresuan, take advantage of this period because It will allow you to explore other things. There's so many other things. And it will not be possible after you leave this university. You'll go into a job, you'll have responsibility, and you won't have the time to see what else will be important. And as I will say in my lecture, for me, what was important was not just the subject, the science, the chemistry that I did, but in particular, in the breakthrough that we made that led to the Nobel Prize, my interest in architecture and other areas was very important. And I will mention that in the rest of my talk. So it's very interesting to be here and to accept this. But as you get older, and I discovered I'm no longer 27, I discovered that some things are difficult. For instance, playing tennis is difficult because I have a shoulder injury. And I went to see the doctor and I said, Doctor, it hurts when I do this. And the doctor said, well, don't do that. That's medical doctors for you, which are some of you around. I think it's very interesting to be here, and I think I will speak to you as young people as you go out. Your parents, I know I had the same problem, but you go to university, you don't think about it. You don't think about your parents, but your parents actually think about you every day. It's a one-way thing. So as you go to an art university and you say, they probably give them a call every now and then. And it'll probably make them, and they might actually pay your mobile phone bill for you, which is another good reason for calling home and telling them you're doing okay, because they do think about you. And I must admit, when I was at university, I didn't think so much about it, but it is important to do that. And with that, I think I'll stop and say thank you very much to the university for this great honor. Thank you.
That was such a remarkable and touching speech. Thank you very much, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, please give him another big round of applause.
In order to express our deep gratitude and appreciation to our Nobel laureate, may I take this opportunity to invite Professor Dr. กระแส ชนะวงศ์ Chancellor of นเรศวร University, to present a congratulatory memento to Professor Sir Harold W.Kroto. Please, Mr. Chancellor. And now, ladies and gentlemen, I think we have come to the noteworthy and breathtaking moment that we are waiting for, the program for part of the 4th ASEAN event series, Bridget's Dialogue Towards a Culture of Peace. Is that right, Dr. Chayani?
Yes, certainly, Dr. Paswan. On behalf of Naresuan University, we organized this event as we believe that it would be an opportunity for you to establish possible linkage with the world-renowned figure.
Yes.
In terms of staff development, research activities, and sharing perspectives that may be of interest between you and Professor Kroto. And now we are very delighted that you have come to participate in this conferment ceremony and the lecture. Thank you very much for that.
So we're waiting for the stage to be set up, just a couple of minutes.
Mm-hmm. What a wonderful occasion, isn't it, today?
Right, that's right. And such a wonderful acceptance speech from Professor Kroto. Mm-hmm. Education is very, very important.
Right. Very good. A remarkable man indeed.
Yes. All right, I think we will be ready soon.
Yes.
Dr. Chayani.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Nevertheless, before we are going to hear Professor Kroto's wonderful lecture, I would like to invite Mr. Uwe Morowitz, the chairman of International Peace Foundation, to give us some background and introduction of the lecture. Please, Mr. Chairman.
Sawadee Krap and welcome to the fourth ASEAN event series, Bridges, Dialogues Towards a Culture of Peace. Bridges is facilitated by the International Peace Foundation, a non-political and non-religious foundation under the common patronage of 21 Nobel Peace Prize laureates based in Vienna. The events are hosted in cooperation with various local partners, including some of the country's major universities, and I would like to thank Nare Swan University and its president, Professor Suchin, and his chairman, Professor Grasset, for hosting our event today. Having started in November last year, Bridges is now being continuously held in Thailand and Vietnam until March, involving the participation of Nobel laureates for peace, physics, chemistry, medicine, and economics, as well as with other keynote speakers, including the former president of the European Commission, Romano Prodi. The fourth ASEAN series of Bridges follows the series of 450 Bridges events, which the International Peace Foundation has already hosted in Thailand, the Philippines, Malaysia, and Cambodia since 2003, as an independent contribution to the Decade for a Culture of Peace and Nonviolence, initiated and promoted by the United Nations General Assembly. The pluralistic program of Bridges highlights the International Peace Foundation's intercultural and transdisciplinary approach towards peace. The foundation doesn't take sides, but acts as a mediator by creating an independent platform for dialogue where representatives of science, politics, economy, culture, religion, the media, and youth can meet, share their viewpoints, listen to each other, and find mutual ways of understanding and cooperation. Therefore, the foundation itself is a bridge and a facilitator between different language groups in our divided societies, where politicians speak another language than artists, and business and religious leaders another one than scientists. In a highly interdependent world, problems cannot be solved by either one of these language groups only, but by working together. After the success of its Bridges programs in Thailand, the Philippines, Malaysia, and Cambodia, the International Peace Foundation has been invited by other ASEAN countries to build further bridges towards peace and international understanding by expanding its program in Southeast Asia to stimulate the intellectual, scientific, and cultural exchange in the region. The fourth ASEAN Bridges series therefore continuously takes place in Thailand and Vietnam from November to March, comprising events with Nobel laureates from all fields. The Nobel laureates visit the region not all at once, but separately to conduct public lectures, seminars, workshops, and dialogues hosted by local institutions during a continued period of 5 months. The aim of Bridges is to facilitate and strengthen dialogue and communication between societies in Southeast Asia with their multiple cultures and faiths, as well as with peoples in other parts of the world, to promote understanding and trust. The events aim at building bridges with local universities and other institutions in Southeast Asia to establish long-term relationships with Nobel laureates in all fields, which may result in common research programs and other forms of collaboration. By enhancing science, technology, and education as a basis for peace and development, the events may lead to a better cooperation for the advancement of peace, freedom, and security in the region, with the active involvement of the young generation, ASEAN's key to the future. This is why Bridges is not designed as a one-time event, but as a continuous process of synergies to make the events a sustainable success for Thailand, for Vietnam, and for Southeast Asia as a whole. I'm grateful to Nare Swan University as well as to our other partners and sponsors who have enabled us to make the idea of Bridges a reality. I would like to say thank you to everyone present today for taking part in this program. May it help us to facilitate a new culture of peace through dialogue, transcending its definition as merely the absence of war or armed conflict, into a new understanding what the basis for peace is: education. In this spirit, we welcome today the Nobel laureate for chemistry, Professor Sir Harold W.Kroto, who has agreed to come to Thailand to support the events. We all look forward to his keynote speech and to his important contribution to build bridges. Thank you, Professor Kroto. Thank you, Margaret Kroto.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for your perspective and special introductory speech. Ladies and gentlemen, before we are listening to the long-awaited lecture from our guest of honor, Professor Sir Harold W.Kroto, please allow us to give you an introduction on the man of the hour.
As you may know, he was awarded the Nobel Prize in Chemistry in 1996 for the discovery of the Buckminster fullerene, the molecule that has been vastly utilized in many fields. But what you may not know is that he has appeared in several educational arenas to foster scientific mindset of young generation, as it appears in many video clips on YouTube featuring his lectures relating to education.
And therefore today his lecture will not be of chemistry, however, but it will be on his passion, which is education-related issue. So ladies and gentlemen, it is our pleasure and honor to listen to his lecture on education, the basics of peace, and the key to an enlightened global community live today.
Speaking of live, you will be astounded to learn that he is also an excellent guitar player, and hopefully we will look forward to hearing a song played by him sometime during this dinner. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Professor Sir Harold W.Kroto for his lecture. Please, Professor.
Okay, it's a pleasure to be here. What's it? Okay, yes, I better do this. Okay. Okay, I think we're somewhere near there. Just one thing I need before I get started. I need something which hopefully we'll find. Okay. Can I borrow that? Yeah, it's okay. Okay, I hope I can do this. Okay, this is a very serious lecture. When I do introduce this lecture, I usually start with my favorite quotation. And it's this one: if you make people think they're thinking, they love you, okay? But if you really make them think, they hate you. And I think many of you have experienced this. And basically, I'm not here to make you feel comfortable. I'm here to make you think about, I guess, a lot of issues. And this one, the basics education, the key to an enlightened global community. And we're going to discuss peace issues as well. The main task of a teacher, I think, is to unlock the creative potential of each and every young person. It's not the only one, but it's one of the most important ones. And I love this picture. My wife, Margaret, took this picture of this little boy totally engrossed in hands-on exercise. The next thing, which is something that's Americans are very keen on, and it's called leadership. But not many people understand what it is. And I think of the role of a leader as that of a teacher whose aim must be to nurture the ability of students to think for themselves so they no longer need to be led. After all, what merit is there to leading a flock of sheep? Okay? Students are not there to be taught to be sheep. Our civilization never moved forward with sheep, but basically that's an issue. Now, we talked about the Enlightenment, and there's a very famous gentleman who thought about this. And I'll mention it in German. Uwe will recognize this. Aufklärung ist der Ausgang des Menschen aus seiner selbstverschuldeten Unmündigkeit. Now, of course, not everybody other than Uwe. And I don't even understand it, but I'm just saying it. No, I do. But it's very difficult to translate. Unmündigkeit is something that I don't think is easy to translate into English. Some things are not translatable. But the best I can do is enlightenment is man's emergence from his self-imposed mental immaturity. This immaturity is the inability to use one's own understanding without another's guidance. What is involved in education really is to teach you how to be citizens without being told what you're to do. That's important. This immaturity is self-imposed if its cause lies not in lack of understanding, but in indecision and lack of courage to use one's own mind without another's guidance. That's enlightenment. All right? Do we live in an enlightened age or an age of enlightenment? He argues that in 1784 in Prussia, the society lived in an age of enlightenment, meaning they were in the process of becoming enlightened, but had not yet achieved an age of enlightenment. I believe that we still have a problem. I think we might even be going backwards. And I think young people today need to be encouraged to think for themselves, because I think that's an issue. However, creativity involves synthesis. Education does. And I thought, when you think about being creative and what you should educate, you should try to ensure that young people are interested in as much as possible in science, art, film, music, humor, writing, graphics, and books. One of the best examples of synthesis really comes from chemistry. Yeah, it's a field, a vineyard, okay? And here you take carbon dioxide and water, and with photons you produce a carbohydrate, and then you do the next best thing, you take an enzyme and you produce alcohol. And then you can, these fellows can do it, and you can enjoy a glass of wine, all right? Now, that's synthesis, where synthesis enables you to take some things like carbon dioxide and water and do something that is more above and beyond what those are by themselves. The great scientist Pasteur said, "In the fields of observation, chance favors only the prepared mind." Well, the prepared mind is about education. How do we, as teachers, how do you as students prepare your mind? Well, I'm going to tell you something about me, okay? Yes, I used to be as young as you young people in the audience. Even that, I was even younger at one time. Hard to believe. And my teacher at the time wrote to my mother. I was called Krotoshina then, okay? And Miss Bowker thinks I had better write and tell you that we are not at all pleased with the way Harold, that is me, has been working during the last few weeks. He is very fond of play. And in fact, I think basically that's what we have to do. We have to make sure that our lessons are about play. I was the only person with a funny name in my class, okay? All the others were typical English names. Thistlethwaite, Thomason, Mottershed, Loxham, Moore, Chatterton, Entwistle, Fairhurst, and Krotoshina. What's that? What's he doing here? And believe it or not, I didn't always want to be a scientist. What I really wanted to be was Superman. And in fact, you see, I thought I'm a scientist And therefore I need evidence. I thought I'd show you myself here, trying to be Superman. But I couldn't fly, so I had to do something else. I played tennis, and I did gymnastics, and I acted in a play, Henry V, a very famous play by Shakespeare. And I thought I'd blow this picture up. I'm the handsome guy over there, by the way, if you didn't recognize me. And I always tell young people, are there any of you who want to be actors? Put your hands up if you want to be an actor. You want to be an actor? Don't do it. Because the guy in front, he became an actor. And he's now 5,000 years old. And I'm a young guy by comparison. But in fact, Ian and I were in the same year at school. He's been a friend ever since. And a fantastic actor at school, and probably the greatest Shakespearean actor of my generation. And in fact, he came out to Tallahassee and did a wonderful one-man show with the students there and stayed with us for a few days. I did other things at school, and I think you need to think about this. My main interest was drawing, okay? I did lots of these things, drawing these things like this. And I only got good for my frog. I was so irritated about that. I thought it should have been very good. And I drew this building. I was interested in architecture, and that's interesting and important. And this is Stockholm Town Hall, which I drew when I was 13 years old, long before I knew what the Nobel Prize was, but that is where the Nobel Prize is awarded. So that was another aspect. And I collected things. I collected things, particularly things that were free. It's wonderful. There are works of art under your nose. You don't have to buy them. You don't have to go to the galleries. Look in magazines, look in books. You can go into art galleries and you can get things that are free. These are things I kept ever since I was your age, 12, 13 or 14 years old. And I just treasure them as much as I do some things that I paid a lot of money for. This is Swinging London, the reason for going back to England from the USA when I was a postdoc, and I discovered it wasn't swinging as much as I thought it was. My favorite image of the sun. I love seeing images and capturing them. Menus from art galleries. Basically, this was free. Okay, fantastic image. Free postcards. I've got a huge collection of postcards. And I love these things that are humorous, okay, and cuttings from magazines. And I like the cartoons as well. And here, then we'll win the Nobel Prize and get rich and go on talk shows. But then, what about babes? When do we get those? You know, rather more important than Nobel Prizes. And other images, beautiful images of photographs from Stanley Kubrick's film. And I like this one. Fantastic shot of the war room in Dr. Strangelove. And there's a fight breaks out there. And here, gentlemen, you can't fight here. It's the war room. A very interesting comment. And my first book that I collected, Refugees, by Ronald Searle, who actually was on the Burma Railroad. And I love this book because these beautiful drawings of refugees. But most of this ends up in the trash can. And I call it trash can art. Don't throw it away. Keep it. When you die, someone else will throw it away. But I want to show you something about photography, because I had a camera, and this is my camera, a Forkländer camera, given to me by my mother. You had to do all that to get a picture. How many in the audience have done that? Yes? Everybody over the age of 325, yes? And, you know, to do all that, you had to have a very good incentive. And actually, she's here in the audience. Okay, there, right there. Yeah, okay. But today, all you have to do is do that. And you've lost a lot. Many of you, in fact, probably all of you, don't understand what's going on inside there. It's very complex electronics. I knew everything about the process, the chemistry, what was going on, the interaction with photons and matter. And I think that epitomizes one of the problems today, is that the technology that we have is actually almost impossible to understand and impossible to repair. And in repairing things, one learns how things work. University is the best place to explore all avenues of your creative potential. When I was at Sheffield University, I was art editor for the student magazine. I did the covers, and I did posters. Here's a cover of Arrows, the magazine at Sheffield. That's another cover. And my first award was not for science, it was for this design. And in fact, basically, it got into the Sunday Times. I won this award, and I used to look like this. Yeah, I did, believe it or not. Hard to believe. And you, well, mainly at the back, are young and beautiful now, and you're going to look old and decrepit like me one day. Okay, there you go. Your youth and beauty will not last. So enjoy it whilst you may. I did posters and these sorts of things, and lots of things like this. And it was very easy at university, and it'll be much more difficult in the future. I do logos as well, and in fact, here gives you an idea of something about logos. And this is the Kroto Research Institute. And basically what they are is dropping something into the test tube. So a little idea of what chemistry is about. A conference on the population explosion. Breakthrough. I like this one. If only that had been a C, it would have been ouch, okay? And I designed a stamp for the UK in the centenary of the Nobel Prize, AFT, Association Française Tallahassee, for my wife, who was with this organization. But you see the French flag there. So in logos, you want little ideas like this, okay? Oh, I redesigned the Japanese flag. I thought I'd show you this one, like that, with the buckyball in there. So those are the things I like doing. And I thought I'd show you how a logo gets prepared here. I was out down in Australia to give a lecture, well, a workshop to 2,000 to 3,000 young people across the whole of Australia. And in fact, I thought I'd design a logo for them, and here it is. I was in a restaurant designing it, and it ended up as this. And I'm trying to sell this to the Australian soccer team at the moment. But those are the sorts of things that I like doing. I want to talk about art because you cannot be an enlightened human being in our world without art and graphics and other things of this nature. I want to show you some of my favorite paintings, my top one paintings. Pope Innocent X by Velasquez, okay? And he's actually a cartoon, basically, on a bottle of wine, okay? And if you see, the cartoonist sees the eyebrows and the hands. Edward Hopper's Nighthawks, one of the great paintings of America. And what do we see? We see loneliness, a depiction of an aspect of human condition. One of my favorite paintings is this one. And then why is that? Well, let's think about it. Let's look at this painting. Look at the hands and the brush. What we see in that angle is pride of this guy who's just painted this car, right? Now, if I ask you, let's exhibit pride without looking at the face. But here, it's brilliant. It's done from the back, just for the angle of the cigarette, right? And the paintbrush. And my favorite English painting, the badminton game. And when we're at home in Tallahassee, or we have our home in England, I look at this image. I only wish I had this painting to think of England and home. Well, the human dimension of art is very important. And I'm now going to show you what I consider to be the great painting of the 20th century. Okay? And it's Guernica. In 1936, the holy city of the Basque people, Guernica, was bombed to the ground by the fascists. Okay? And there's a lesson for this, because on the second floor of the United Nations building in Manhattan, just outside the Security Council, this piece of 20th century artwork offers a graphic and chilling reminder of the horrors of war. And let's look at it. Can there be any more powerful depiction of a mother whose child has just been killed by a bomb? That is the way that art can get you. A dying soldier, a dead soldier, a horse with a spear inside it, the whole painting is the greatest painting of the 20th century. Because a great painting has to capture some spiritual aspect, not in a mystical sense, not in a religious sense, something to do with the human condition. And that's why that is a great painting. Well, there are other aspects. Some artists that we know. Kittai, he became a close friend in the last few years of his life. Paul Wunderlich and Karen Sikessi, I thought I'd show you. Well, let me just go back to Kittai because here he is. He just died a few years ago, some of his drawings. And in fact, here we have Marinka smoking, one of my favorite paintings. Paul Wunderlich and Karen Sikessi are friends of ours. Paul also died just a year ago, and here we are working together on one of his prints and one of his paintings just for me. And here is a painting on the wall. And Karen is a photographer, and from Madame Recamier's David's Madame Recamier, sorry about that. She took this photograph, and here is a photograph that we have, and here is my all-time favorite painting. And I want you to look at this, because it's called Streichholz. And look at the brilliant way that the burning match is part of her eye, okay? I think fantastic painting. It's about synthesis, and this is a drawing, a self-portrait of Paul. Roger Dean lives in our town in England, and here he's one of his great covers, record covers, The Flying Elephants. Also a depiction of an interesting depiction of this bird coming down like a pelican. If you've ever seen pelicans diving, and here is some similarity between these two airplanes. Another person that we've met, and he died too, not that long ago, one of my favorite posters, art. And here, an artist painting the doves of peace. Okay, and here he is, taking his hat off, and here I am, paying homage with my hat on, and here Margaret again took this photograph, and then this is my favorite photograph. Margaret took it from the back, okay? That's about art. Our artwork, we have that in our house around us. And I think most people do have things on the wall, and they're very important. Our house in England, by Bruni, Leonor Feeney, again Leonor Feeney, Howard Hodgkin, Paul Patrick Caulfield, Jeffrey Jones, Leonard Baskin. And I think this is one of the most incredible pieces of art. I think it comes from this part of the world, maybe the Philippines. But how in a piece of wood can you show sorrow so powerfully? And I was given this, and I'd never seen it before, but since then I've seen it in many places. Sculpture by Ralph Brown. And my favorite road, our favorite road, Highway 1 in California, this beautiful black and white image. The Golden Gate Bridge, Santa Fe Railways, and again, a painting in our house in Florida. So I surround myself with these things. We do, and they're very important. Now I'm going to come to architecture, because that is an interest of mine as well. I drew this, Le Corbusier building, Frank Lloyd Wright's Falling Water, Stockholm Town Hall, a favorite building, the Sagrada Familia in Barcelona by Gaudi, the Hong Kong Shanghai Bank by Norman Foster, and this amazing building by Frank Lloyd Wright. And I want to show you something about this. If you look at the structure, it's the same as this Roman aqueduct, okay? The architecture, where the architect has taken this beautiful structure and created a building with the same one. And that is in the film Gattaca, if you go. But the final picture is this one, because this image led to our breakthrough in science. It came from architecture. It didn't come just from chemistry. And we'll come a little bit to that. In music, you had to play guitar, and Margaret's in the middle. She used to have long hair, right? And this is one of my friends. And I used to play the guitar. Now my fingers get trapped in the strings. And I want to talk about creativity here, again, where you synthesize by taking music together with film, okay? Let's see, hopefully, that this will work. Let's stop it there. It's on YouTube, so you can watch it again. But this was, I think, considered one of the first big breakthroughs in the beginning of a film, where you had this little movie. But listen to the way that music and the picture go together, okay? So that's what's creativity, to do something, bringing together music like that together with an image, okay? Not only that, oops, let's get out of that, I think I have to go down. Another one, closer to home in some ways for us, which is, go to there, one of my all-time pieces of favorite pieces of music. That evokes for me the desert in the USA, bringing music together with film in a way. Again, synthesis. I just designed a stained glass window. And someone came a few weeks ago after my lecture and say, well, you design book jackets. Design one. And here I've got Schrödinger's flea bag with a flea on the nose. And here you go. All right, so that's it. And this is my most recent design. Our two sons have a little business. Well, it's not making much money, but anyway, it's basically our older son's made a film with Ian McKellen. Ian agreed to make a little movie for him, a one-day shoot. And our younger son is a cartoonist, and they wanted a logo. So here I found a logo from a construction company with the initial K. And there was a pencil in the same book as I was looking at it. And I thought, well, I can do something with this. I can get the K, put this into the film side, and then bring in the pencil tip, do that, make it look like a pencil, and end up as Kroto Film and Design. And that gives you an idea of what I think one of my favorite creations is all about. Bringing things together, basically seeing what others have done and seen, but bringing them together in a different and new way. Now, science, totally misunderstood. Let me give you first an example of one of the issues. Common sense. Common sense says that the sun goes around the earth. The sun, who agrees with me? Nobody. I don't know what it does, but in Florida it starts somewhere over there and it ends over here. The sun goes round the earth. Who agrees with me? None of you. One person, right? It's uncommon sense. It's uncommon sense that tells us the earth is turning on its axis, that makes it seem as though the sun is going around us. And it's the uncommon sense and bravery of Copernicus, Galileo, and Giordano Bruno, who was burnt to death. That's interesting. Our understanding of this and claiming that it was the other way around, these people had a big problem. Galileo was threatened by the Inquisition and the Catholic Church. So it's very interesting. Not a single person here agreed with me that it's actually common sense which tells us that these guys are wrong. Or are they wrong? Carlo Ponti's film is the death of Giordano Bruno. Okay. Most people have accepted the claim that the Earth goes around the sun without knowing the evidence. I'll ask you a question. How many of you know the evidence that the Earth is turning on its axis? Not a single person has put their hand up. And I want you to think about that, because that's the first major lesson of today. The one that I want you to think about, and perhaps make you hate me. Because everyone in this room has accepted, it seems, that the Earth is going around the sun without knowing the evidence. And that's one of the biggest problems in the world today. And I want you to think, what else have you accepted without evidence? I want you to think about this. Because we're in a very dangerous world. Because large numbers of people are accepting bullshit without thinking about it. And really trying to force other people to accept this bullshit. And that's one of the problems that the world faces, and one of the reasons we have some difficulty in achieving peace. Okay, no evidence, okay? The Pew Center came out with this, that God created the world in 6 days, Genesis 44, this is in the States. That the majority of people think that God created the day in 6 days. Actually, most of them believe it was in 7 days. They don't even get that, because he was supposed to have rested on the seventh day. God is a divine presence. Over, well, that's 57% believe that. Evolution, 33, then don't know, 10. And we know some of the dark consequences of this. The problem is that nonsense is common today. Common sense, uncommon sense, and common nonsense. I'm going to give you one example of this. There's this $27 million museum in Cincinnati. School children are going in busloads into this museum, and others as well. Did humans do it with dinosaurs? God made Adam and Eve on the same day as land animals, so dinosaurs and people lived at the same time. Well, if they were at the same time, we must have put saddles on them and ridden them. Okay. What did they originally eat? Before Adam sinned, all animals, including dinosaurs, were vegetarian. Well, you don't need those teeth for a salad. Okay. What happened to the dinosaurs? I didn't go to Noah's Ark. They were sort of buried by the flood and preserved as fossils. And there's a Noah's Ark there, and Noah's a Scot. He's got a Scottish accent saying, "We got to build a big boat because there's a big flood coming." Okay. And here's a little girl scratching her head because she knows that there are two problems here. Science suggests that the world is something like 4,500 million years old. Okay, so that's the issue, all right? Science has suggested to us very strongly that this animal is our cousin. And I'm proud that 99% of my genes are the same as this guy. And look at the humanity in the face. It's obviously sort of a football supporter who's just lost. Their team's just lost, okay? 70% the same as this guy. 50% is the same as a fruit fly, and the maggots as well. You're related to the maggots in this thing. I like the 70% the same as pumpkins. And you only have to look at the average politician to check on that. There's more evidence for evolution than any truth we have ever discovered. The evidence comes not just from Darwin writing this in a book. It comes from chemistry, physics, geology, biology, geography, paleontology, oceanography, volcanology, tectonic plates, you name it. The attack, particularly in the USA, by large numbers of people on evolution is not just an attack on Darwin, it's an attack on the whole of the sciences. And that's an important issue today. And what has the sciences done? Well, let's look at penicillin. You don't have to pray, that's a miracle. In 3 weeks, this little girl in 1942 was cured. A year early, she would have died. And here is one of the unsung heroes of that story. And the future is that bacteria are evolving with an immunity to antibiotics. We must just think about it, and young people like you are going to face a future where we have to solve this problem. We may be going back to this. Anesthetics. I want you to have a look. There were no mobile phones in those days. This was an amputation without an anesthetic. I want you to look at it and see what it was like 200 years ago to have an operation. Women had a mastectomy without an anesthetic. There can be no more humanitarian contribution from all of the sciences, and particularly from chemistry, as anesthetics. That's what scientists can do. That's why science is as humanitarian an area of study and for a career as you can possibly get. But it's misunderstood. People don't understand what science is. There's certainly several aspects to it. There's certainly a body of knowledge, what you learn at school. The application of that knowledge is technology. The many ways in which we discover something that was not understood before, the scientific method, but much more important than that. And something that's been forgotten because science is so fantastically useful is that it used to have another name, natural philosophy. And in the perception of most people, its incredible value of science has been lost in the spectrum of human intellectual development. The most important aspect by far is that natural philosophy is the only philosophical construct we have devised, the human race has devised, to determine truth with any degree of reliability. I'm going to read it again. It's the second most important thing as far as I'm concerned. I think it's important. So as I'm the guy in charge at the moment, it's important. Natural philosophy is the only philosophical construct we have devised to determine truth with any degree of reliability. I'll change it slightly. I'm going to define and just call the philosophical construct to determine truth as natural philosophy. Okay. In that case, the ethical purpose of education must involve the teaching of young people how they can decide what they're being told is true. I hope we can all agree on that. And the teaching of a skeptical, evidence-based assessment of all claims without exception is a fundamental intellectual integrity issue. Without evidence, anything goes. Think about it. The freedom to doubt, the great scientist, great communicator. I think the greatest communicator of any kind, not just science community, was Richard Feynman. In the meaning of it all says, the freedom to doubt is an important matter in the sciences, and I believe in other fields. It was born out of a struggle. It was a struggle to be permitted to doubt, to be unsure. Giordano Bruno was burnt to death. Galileo was threatened by the Inquisition. Copernicus couldn't, he sort of published it after his death. He was dead when it was published. And I do not want to forget the importance of that struggle and by default let it fall away. If you know you're unsure, you have a chance to change the situation. I want to demand this freedom for future generations, for you young people at the back. And I think it's under threat. It's falling away. It's a problem. Walt Whitman, the great American writer, said it better than anybody I know. He said, I like the scientific spirit, the holding off, the being sure, but not too sure. The double take, the great writer, sure and not too sure. The willingness to surrender the ideas when the evidence is against them. This is ultimately fine. It keeps the way beyond open. That's the critical part. Here he draws attention to an incredibly important thing. Science is open. It moves on inexorably. If someone makes a mistake, we find it out. Our understanding of the universe advances and advances. It gets better and better and better. All other constructs are locked forever in unshakable dogmatic opinion, intrinsically impervious to rational criticism, because people believe these things without evidence, and so there's no argument. You can't do anything about it. That doesn't mean it isn't important to them personally, but it's not important to me. And I don't wish to be bound by the beliefs of people who have no evidence and just constructs of the human race. Science is different from all the other things. It's the way it is, the universe. This is the way the universe. Everything else, the music, the arts, the books, the politics, the religions, they're all constructs of the human race. In that sense, science is different. And that's why there is a conflict in my mind and the minds of 90% of scientists. Let's go on to something else. Language and culture. Language in all its forms is the key to unlocking the aspects of our world from cultural creations of mankind to the mysteries of the universe. Okay. In a Faraday discussion in Birmingham in 1954 on the study of fast reactions, the German scientist Manfred Eigen asked the Oxford Don Ronnie Bell how the English language would describe reactions which were faster than fast. Ronnie Bell replied, "Damn fast reactions, Manfred. If they get faster than that, the English language will not fail you. Call them damn fast reactions indeed." That's English, okay? If you want to understand Shakespeare, you have to understand English. If you want to understand Goethe and Schiller, you have to learn German. If I want to understand the great Thai writers, I have to understand Thai. Can't be done. Japanese and Chinese characters. Mizaru, Kikazaru, Iwazaru. Zaru translates both as no and monkey, and therefore no see, no speak, no hear, and we understand why in Japanese the three monkeys are there, okay? We can understand Chinese characters, and without it, you don't understand the culture of the Chinese. In fact, I can understand that because that is actually Kroto in Japanese, okay? Kroto means expert or professional. So let's talk about this. The language of science. Language of physics, the great American physicist.
If you're interested in the ultimate character of the physical world, or the complete world, and at the present time, our only way to understand that is through a mathematical type of reasoning, then I don't think a person can fully appreciate, or in fact, can appreciate much of these particular aspects of the world, the great depth and character of the universality of the laws, the relationships of things, without an understanding of mathematics. I think it's just, I don't know any other way to do it. We don't know any other way to describe it accurately and well, or to see the interrelationships without it. So I don't think a person who hasn't developed some mathematical sense is capable of fully appreciating this aspect of the world. Don't misunderstand me. There are many, many aspects of the world that mathematics is unnecessary for, such as love, and which are very delightful and wonderful to appreciate and to be awed and mysterious about. And I don't mean to say that the only thing in the world is physics, but you were talking about physics, and if that's what you're talking about, then to not know mathematics is a severe limitation in understanding the world.
So this is it. The language of physics, the language of the universe is mathematics. Galileo understood that. Newton understood this. And it was a long time before people realized that you had to look at this, and this was the language. And it's not my fault. It's the way it is. I often say, someone says, "Can you explain this without mathematics?" I say, "Do you think I use mathematics to make my life difficult?" That would be like trying to give this lecture in Thai when I don't understand how to do it, okay? And I think it's not, as Feynman says, that it's the only thing. But if you want to understand physics, that's the way it is. Okay? That's the way it is. Not my fault. It's the universe's fault. Okay? For not... Now, some people appreciate this. Okay? They've got tattoos. And I think they're making a statement that they do like these things. Okay? This is a mistake here, right? You know. All right? The Schrödinger equation. Maxwell's relationship, okay, DNA, okay, the Heisenberg uncertainty, LSD, I'll gloss over this, okay, a bucking ball and a Möbius strip. And my favorite is this one, Nicole, a physics graduate student. My tattoo is the Taylor expansion of sign. And listen to this. I consider it the most beautiful thing I have ever learned. Isn't that wonderful? Here's a young woman tattooing this and says it's the most beautiful thing I have ever learned. It's like someone learned something, some poetry. And here is the group picture. And it shows you how international science is. This is our group in the UK before I left for Florida. And we see people from all over the world. If you become a scientist, you become someone with a culture that transcends everything else. Because it's not nationalistic, it's not what you believe, it's not political. It's the way the universe is. And that's the most important aspect of it. The written word is something interesting as well. John Cornforth, who was shown here at the age of 18, when he finally realized that he was going to be deaf for the rest of his life. Yet he overcame that, become a Nobel Prize winner. I met him for the first time in 1975, and I thought you had to be as smart as this guy to win a Nobel Prize. You don't need to be. I know from my own experience. You have to be a good scientist and to actually do some nice work. He says, poetry is my music. This is interesting. It tells you something about people who are really totally deaf. He said, I remember some 20,000 lines of poetry. And when I remember them, I often find I've improved them. Again, Othello, a favorite line of mine. Again, you have to understand the English language. Othello 3:3. What dost thou mean? Your good name in man and woman, dear my lord, is the immediate jewel of their souls. Who steals my purse steals trash to something, nothing. Money to something, nothing. That's Shakespeare telling you something about money. 'Twas mine, 'tis his, and has been slave to thousands. But he that filches from me my good name robs me of that which not enriches him and makes me poor indeed. That's the great Shakespeare. And you, many here, can understand something of the culture. And without language, you don't understand it. Humor, that's important. Okay, there you go. I just think that's funny. I don't know why, but it does look funny. My favorite cartoon goes back, and I've got this from when I was a child. I thought I'd show you it, okay? This man is looking at a toll bridge. In those days, it was 1 shilling. Cars, horse-drawn vehicles, 1 shilling. Hand-drawn vehicles are free. So here's the solution, okay? That is humor, and humor is vital. Our son has taken this is a Jackson Pollock painting, okay? And here he's done a cartoon, and you can see the pigeons actually did it, okay? I thought I'd show you one of my favorite pieces of film, okay? And this is considered to be one of the most appreciated bit of film in the UK. And I thought I'd show you.
Now, righto, Grandad, you pop up.
Now, I'm going to tell you what they're trying to do. They're going to take a chandelier down, okay? So we're just going to go on. We'll go on a bit. Right?
Chandelier stays up there on that ceiling, eh? It is not by the power of prayer or double-sided sticky tape. There is a long threaded bolt through that chandelier.
We'll be round at the garages.
Right. Here, while you're there, give the...
We're going to get paid.
Look, his lordship is away on holiday. He'll pay us when he gets back. Now, come on. Get these ladders up. Yeah, you never know. Might be in for a bonus.
Oh, yeah.
I found it, Dale.
Yeah, I see he's found the nut. I told you we could trust him. Right, come on, get this out.
I'm starting to undo it.
Yeah. No! Go on, Benny, we ain't even up the ladders yet.
Grandad, don't you touch nothing till we tell you.
Come on, you better get up there. Right, Rodney, is there anything you want?
Yeah, I want to go home. How too safe.
That is all right. Look, this is the chance I've been waiting for. Now, don't let me down, Rodney. Now, don't let me down. Right?
I'm going to stop it there. These two are going to take the chandelier down and clean it for half the price. Okay? So they're going to take this thing down. All right? So there you go.
All right, Grandad, we're ready. You can start undoing it now.
He's coming, Dale boy. One more turn, Dale.
Right. Now brace yourself, Rodney. Brace yourself.
Now that was rated, I think, the funniest scene in television. And it's about the unexpected. And that's about creativity as well, to do something unexpected. Books and bookshops, we can't pass. Our favorite bookshop in San Francisco. And I thought I'd show you an interesting book. It's called Pi. All right? Now, why do I find it interesting? It's pi to 1 million decimal places. It's a Japanese book, okay? On the first page, you see the first row is pi to 100 decimal places. It goes down on this page, okay, to 44,000. There are 10,000 on the first page. And now I'm going to go to 10 pages at a time. 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 And here we are, basically, at the end. That's a million. That's only a million. We've lost our understanding of what a million actually is. It's a lot. $1 million is a lot of money, right? And the last number, the millionth decimal place, is 1. And also Japanese humor is 314 yen. Okay. So that's a book I find interesting. I'm going to tell you something about numbers, which people have forgotten. A favorite book is All Over Coffee, Pictures and Drawings of San Francisco. And I like the statements. Set your ideals to those of the image of your idol, pull your collar tight and walk into the storm. Take a stand and automatically you have a supporter and an enemy. The problem today is that too few people are prepared to take a stand against the inhumanity that we see in many other aspects that we see today. And so those are the aspects in books. So what am I doing? I try to do something, and one thing that I'm doing is setting up a project called GEOSET, G-E-O-S-E-T, Global Educational Outreach for Science, Engineering and Technology. We use a capture station. We have a video and PowerPoint. I don't need to be here. I now go to India 3 or 4 times a year by internet, okay? And in fact, we use these to do this. And I want to show you what our students do, okay? Our students are fantastic at it.
Here are the Beatles. George, John, Ringo, and Paul. We all know their music, and most of us even know of their impact on the world today. However, whether we realize it or not, we've had more contact with another type of beetle, and they have had far more influence on our very lives. And I'm talking about these beetles, the insects. And this presentation will be all about the wonderful world of beetles.
It turns out that students are very good at creating educational material, okay? That's an undergraduate. Here is a research student.
Hi, my name is Kerry Gilmore, and I am a graduate student here at Florida State University. I work for Dr. Al Bugan as an organic chemist. Now, I love organic chemistry because it provides you the opportunity to go through and be an architect, an engineer, a builder, because you can go through and we can really look at designing molecules. We can figure out how to actually make these molecules.
Let's stop it there. I can make an architect and an engineer on a molecular scale, on a nanoscale. So you don't have to be an architect. You get the same thrill out of building a structure on a nanoscale as you can on a large scale. And it's sometimes a lot cheaper as well. Okay. And I'm going to jump on because I want to show you, if I can pull this over. Okay, let me get it going. It's
we make these molecules, and then finally we actually get to go into the lab and actually build these things. Now, the greatest organic chemist by far is nature. Nature can go through and take something as utterly simplistic as these small seeds, and through a series of organic transformations using chemistry that we ourselves use, it's able to go through and transform it into these beautifully complex and beautiful flowers that you can see here. Now, what we do is much the same. We'll take something relatively small, something relatively simplistic, and through a series of transformations, we need to figure out how to make something that's much larger, much more complex.
I'm going to jump on.
And if we look at that last structure there with the last radical before our reaction finishes, it goes through, and it looks like if we were to add more triple bonds in this case, we could go through and fully zip up these structures. We could go through and take something, instead of just something that's relatively small, and close it up. We can extend that all the way through and form much longer chains. And
I'm going to jump on now because we're running out of time. And oops, it's becoming a bit erratic, but they can get around that. We've got projects on wolves. And for teachers, look at what we've done for assessment, okay? Instead of a pile of papers that you have to mark and give you a headache, you can sit and drinking a glass of wine and watch the student giving a presentation. We've revolutionized the resume as well. We've put our students on the top because we send the URL of their presentation, and Kerry just got a Fulbright Award. And here is our Hall of Fame. There's the Fulbright Award. Steve got us a Rich Media Award by doing a fantastic presentation on the internet. Prajna got 4 tenure track offers. Brittany got into medical school. She said the GeoSet presentation was the defining factor. She said, I think it helped me get my position. Artrees, I did the interview. She walked in and they said, we enjoyed your presentation on the internet. She was put at her ease almost immediately. Jennifer got into vet school. Dan got a Goldwater scholarship. He got his job at NHK. And this is interesting for you here. Sayano is an Indian student who was in Japan, a postdoc. And she sent the URL of her presentation on the internet to the Mahatma Gandhi University, and she was hired as a professor. And Mark Riley sent the data up to NSF so that the NSF who were funding the students could see who they were funding. It works. And Steve Aqua, Sam Ruston, Karen, and Penny are people helping me. Right. The last part. If you become scientists or anything, you should be involved with organizations that are something to do with responsibility. And this is just one, the International Network of Engineers and Scientists for Global Responsibility. If you're a physicist, we don't need any more atomic bombs. If you're a chemist, we don't need any more napalm. And if you're an engineer, we don't need any more landmines. You can look and see little kiddies with one leg blown off by a landmine playing soccer on crutches, dreaming of going to the paraplegic Olympic Games. We don't need any more of that. Leon Lederman, Nobel Prize in Physics in 8 years, he sent me an email. He said, Harry, you see a lot of young people. Can you say this for me? So many years have passed and the human race is saddled with enough nuclear weapons to destroy the planet. We must redouble our efforts to unify the science community against this huge stupidity. It's not just the science community. It's the whole community. Scientists are only 1 or 2% of this community. The 1 or 2% who created this place. Computers, lasers, the paint on the wall, the material on the floor, the lights and the electricity was created by 1 or 2% of the world. It needs to be 95% of them. Joe Rotblat became a very close friend in the last few years of his life. He was the greatest man I knew personally. And here he is. He was actually the only scientist to leave the Manhattan Project. And before the bomb was actually finished, if only they'd all left it, it wasn't necessary. In his Nobel address, he says, we appeal as human beings to human beings. Remember your humanity and forget the rest. If you can do so, the way lies open to a new paradise. If you cannot, there lies before you the risk of universal death. The quest for a war-free world has a basic purpose, survival. But if in the process we learn to achieve it by love rather than by fear, great lines, by kindness rather than by compulsion. If in the process we learn to combine the essential with the enjoyable, the expedient with the beautiful, the practical with the beautiful, this will be an extra incentive to embark on this great task. Above all, remember your humanity and forget the rest. And here is Joe. He got the Peace Prize with pugwash because he spent more or less all the rest of his life from about the age of 30 to stop the proliferation of nuclear weapons. And here he is in his office where we recorded interviews with him. And look at this. How is that staying up? I just do not know. It's something else. My favorite poster, when I first saw it, I fell in love with this poster. What is it? Okay. I'm an alien creature. I was sent from another planet with a message of goodwill from my people. The message says, Dear Earth people, when you finally at last destroy your planet and have no place to live, you can come and live with us. And we will teach you how to live in peace and harmony. And we will give you a coupon good for 10% off all deep dish pizzas too. Sincerely, Bob. 3 things. Destruction of the planet. I'm a scientist. I'm not sure, not very sure, but it don't look good. I think we could be. And because I think we could be, we must err on the side of caution. We must do everything we can to ensure that we're not making things worse. We're not doing that. That's what bothers me. Only one thing. Peace and harmony, I'm sure about this. Is it not incredible that we cannot solve our problems without sitting down together and trying to solve our problems by sending young people to go and kill each other day in, day out? There are 27, 29 wars going on at the present time. Okay? Basically, terrorist wars of all kinds. We're in the 21st century with weapons of mass destruction. And we can't solve our problems by sitting down together when you know it makes sense to do that. But there is a third thing, and it's the pizza and a sense of humor. And without a sense of humor, life's not worth living, at least not as far as I'm concerned. I'm going to finish now with an aspect of education that I want you to think about. It's my favorite cartoon about education, and it comes from Peanuts, Snoopy. I got a C in coat hanger sculpture. How could anyone get C in coat hanger sculpture? May I ask a question? Was I judged on the piece of sculpture itself? If so, is it not true that time alone can judge a work of art? Or was I judged on my talent? If so, is it right that I be judged on part of my life over which I have no control? Was I judged on my effort? Then I was judged unfairly, for I tried as hard as I could. Was I judged on what I had learned about this project? If so, then were not you, my teacher, also being judged on your ability to transmit your knowledge to me? Are you willing to share in my C? Teachers love this one, right? Perhaps I was judged on the quality of the coat hanger itself out of which my creation was made. Now, is this also not unfair? Am I to be judged on the quality of the coat hangers that are used by the dry cleaning establishment that returns our garment? Is that not the responsibility of my parents? Should they not share in my C? The squeaky wheel gets the grease. But let's see what Sally asks. How could anyone get C in coat hanger sculpture? Well, I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you the most amazing coat hanger sculpture you could ever imagine. In 2010, the Royal Academy Summer Exhibition, and if you're in London in the summer, you must go to the Royal Academy Summer Exhibition. It's a cultural sort of cult in England. There was a coat hanger sculpture, and there you'll see, well, there are a few coat hangers. We all agree with that. However, let's have a look at what it is. That's a coat hanger sculpture. And I use this for young people to think, whenever you do a project, you start the project and you look at the gorilla and say, I'm going to do something that no one else other than I could have imagined. Something that is an A+++++. And Sally should have got a Z by comparison. This is an amazing, I think it's one of the most amazing pieces of imagination I've ever seen. And when you do anything, think, whatever project it is, think about the gorilla and say, how can I do something as amazing like this? And the way to do this and to do is something to do with attitude. Just look at this little boy. Margaret took this photograph of this little boy that I showed you at the beginning. Totally engrossed in what they're doing. And education is about this. He's not caring about prizes and Nobel Prizes or what else. It's the moment, hands-on creating something that's happening. And it's about attitude. The simple recipe of success is when you do an assignment, make sure you give it the best shot. If you're satisfied with second-rate effort, look for something else where only the best effort you can do will satisfy you, not the teacher, you personally, you yourself. If you do this, all the time, you will invariably find you will do everything better than other people who might have been able to do better because maybe they're smarter, there are people smarter than I am, and they're never going to win the Nobel Prize. Not that that's important. I never set out to win the Nobel Prize. I didn't want to do things which were important. I wanted to do things that I wanted to do. And it turned out, in one of the most unimportant experiments before we did it, turned out to be one of the most important experiments. Just do what you're interested in doing. If you do that, you'll do better than other people, and it's called determination. Okay. So there it is. I'm only here to make you think. Thank you.
Wow. Wow. I cannot find any words to say. That was a passionate and marvelous speech.
Yes, remarkable.
What do you think, Dr. Chianin?
Well, I must say, Professor, your lecture took us back through our youthful memories, especially the only foods and horses and peanuts. And it merely states the beauty of life. And a picture is worth 1,000 words. And what you have shown us today, worth more than 1,000,000. And from here, I will give it my best shot, Professor. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, please give another big round of applause to Professor Kroto, please. And now I think it has come to the question and answer question. I will give the floor to our audience who would like to ask Professor Kroto a question.
Any questions are welcome. Please just raise your hand if you have one in mind.
Our staff will bring the microphone to you, or you can come to the microphone that's set up on the aisle. Please
okay,
raise
I
your
usually
hand.
discover people are speechless after my talk, but I'm not.
Okay, while we are waiting for the question from the floor, may I have the honor to start one off, Professor? If we have been educated in principles and tradition and discipline, what is the first step in making creativity?
Well, I did mention it. I think that what you have to do is look at a problem and try to see it in your own personal way. I think it's not you mustn't. You can look at what others have done and basically steal it, and present it in another way. I mean, Picasso actually did in one of, let me see whether I can find this. If I take this down, whoops, no, I didn't want to do that. I'm going to go back into it, okay. I need to be here, actually. I don't know quite why it's gone there. And now we go up, oh, curious, okay, we'll go to this. Picasso said something which applies, I think, to this. Let me see whether I can find it. Where is Picasso? He's somewhere here, I think. Very odd. Very strange. It seems to have disappeared. Oh, there he is. Okay, fine. Okay. This is Picasso's contribution to creativity. And this is basically the bad artists imitate, the great artists steal. Okay.
Very good.
It's actually a bit facetious, and it's crossed out, and it says Banksy there, who's an artist as well. What it's really telling you is that you look at what others have done and see it in a different way. But try to do it in your own personal way. And in fact, to some extent, I showed you this logo, and I think I show it because I rather like that logo. And I'll just do it again because it seems to me that it epitomizes the sort of things that, the way I think. And I showed it, and basically for this one, that I saw these two images, a K and then the pencil, and put them together. And I like them both very much, but I put them together in a different way. And it's, again, I think one of Pasteur's statements, to see what others have seen, but think what no one has thought, okay? And that means you have to develop your own personal way of looking at the world. And jump forward. In science, we can't move without what other people have done. So it's not so much as stealing, it's but looking at what they've done and then seeing how that might apply. You might apply that in a different way and bring your own expertise to that. Okay? You get the idea? Okay.
Thank you very much for such a good answer.
Yes,
please raise your hand and do state your name prior to the questions.
At the school today, the only people who asked questions were the women.
Please,
so
Mr. Chancellor.
Very interesting.
Mr. Chairman.
Are there still men and women? I thought we were all unisex.
Pardon?
Are there still men and women? I thought we are in the age of unisex. You can't hear me?
I'm going deaf, so sort of. Yes.
I'm sorry.
but
I'm Ponchuli Ashwabrung, and I'm from Naresuan University. I was just mentioning that you said only women asking the question.
Yes, at the school today.
So I just, in the era of being doubtful, so I said, don't you think that we are in the age of unisex? In the age of unisex, no men and women?
In the unisex?
Yes.
Yes, I think so, yes. But I found here in Thailand, in the school this morning, the only students who asked questions were all the women. And so I think you've made a great improvement on that. They are the ones who really are asking maybe questions. So yes, but I hope some of the boys would do, but they were too shy.
I'm so moved, touched, and inspired by your one concept of freedom to doubt.
Yes, it's not
and
mine.
That hits me right on the dot.
Yes.
The freedom to doubt. And as a professor and a Nobel laureate, I would like to ask you to please share how you could nurture the freedom to doubt in the young minds. And first of all, since I feel that I'm forever young, even though I'm in my 60s, all right? So I'm doubtful of what you have shared with us earlier, because you did mention that there are 3 senses. And since I'm so young, I jotted down 4 senses. So I want to know what are the 3 senses that you were mentioning before.
What are the
3 senses?
Oh,
because I jotted down 4 senses.
Common sense is one.
Yes.
Uncommon sense.
Right.
And common nonsense.
What about a sense of humor?
Nonsense is common now.
What about the sense of humor? You did mention that too.
Well, that's another thing. But my 3 senses were common sense,
non-common sense, and common
nonsense.
And nonsense. Thank you very much.
That's the 3rd one.
Please.
But the freedom to doubt is perhaps more important. And I think that means that that presents the teacher with a big problem, because they have to have courage, the courage to enable their students to question what you're teaching them. And that means that when you've made a mistake, that you were able to admit that to the class. And that's a difficult problem. And I have problems with that too. So I try to make sure that when I teach, I don't make too many mistakes. But I make mistakes. And one of the most important aspects of a scientist to recognize that mistakes are made, and when you make them, that you can admit them. And that the students realize that the teaching is not about the teacher being correct, but teaching the method whereby you learn. And I remember very strongly when I came home from school, and I said to my father, this was not right. And he said, it's not for the teacher to be right all the time. They're human beings. People make mistakes. To understand that mistakes are going to be made, and that you, first of all, if you make them, you make sure that, yes, I made a mistake, and can admit that. And that's a good lesson, not just for me, but for the students. And I find it more difficult as well. But it is a challenge that the teacher must really instill in young people doubt and questioning. Because without those, the human race is stuck. And I think a lot of it is stuck. And I think that's one of the problems that we face today. That dogma is controlling many of the actions of countries and large groups of people. And it bothers me.
Thank you. Another question from Professor Dr. Gosashanawong.
One here and then the lady there, okay.
Professor Kroto, it might be too difficult for me to ask any question, but I would like to say that you are a great leader. When I say great leader, means I just come back from Indonesia, and this year, the Teachers' Day, they said the teacher is a leader.
I better come closer.
A teacher is a leader.
Yes.
So you are a great teacher and great leader.
No, I wish I were. But go on, yes.
When
I try.
Yeah, when I say you are a great teacher, because you are trying to help us to know something without teaching.
Yeah.
You are not teaching, but you help us to learn.
Okay.
And help us to think.
I'm sure I can't help you. I help you, but you can help me.
Yeah. At the same time, when I say you are a great leader, it's according to my definition. A leader is always add value to the other people. You add value to many people, including the audience.
Okay, thank you.
The second part is you add value to your work, so we understand your work easily. At the same time, you add value to yourself, that you give us to understand that to be a great leader, you have to know everything in something and know something in everything, you see. Right. This is, I believe that the audience agree with me. Why not give him a big applause? Join me. Yeah. Appreciate your lecture. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Any questions? Please do state your name prior to the question, please.
Yes, my name is Rosemary Wanchupela of Rosemary Academy. And I just would like to ask you why the scientific community doesn't put more research, thought into how you achieve peace and how nonviolence actually works and how it can be an answer to some of the problems we face. I came here to this country 51 years ago as a member of the Peace Corps, United States Peace Corps. Peace Corps. We celebrated our 50th anniversary, and it was on volunteerism in Thailand, not about peace. That's 50 years ago. And I just, since the time of Martin Luther King, Mahatma Gandhi, I just don't see much research and effort going into finding peace. I mean, it's like, for the military, we invest billions. Now, I know our American government doesn't, the amount of money we give for research is less than it was, and the universities aren't getting what they need for research. But it seems to me, with all the emphasis, bridges for peace, this is what brought me here today more than anything. And I just don't see those bridges being built unless we really put some effort into it. And I wanted to know what you might think about that as a scientist.
Well, I mean, I do think that many scientists do work for peace. Joe Rotblat, Leon Lederman, and others, and people like Richard Feynman and others have talked about this. But peace is not a scientific issue. It's a social issue. And I think, as I said in the last part of my talk, I really don't understand how it is that we somehow, from our political sort of infrastructure, that we produce leaders who can't sit down, find it almost impossible to sit down at a table and discuss the problems that we have. I found this quite incredible in the 21st century. I do think that among the scientists I know, and I know a lot of Nobel Prize winners, people like Elie Wiesel and others, and Joe Rotblat, these are people who did work for peace, okay? And I think we've done a reasonable job, but we're a very small group of people. I said about probably the number of people who have doctorates in science is about 1% of the population. I think the problem is in education. How is it that we still, through our educational programs, can produce people who find that the only solution to international problems are belligerent ones. I think we have to look at some parts of the world where dogma is being distributed, a dogma of antagonism to groups who are not the same as ourselves. I'm in the USA, and I don't like nationalism and patriotism. I think there's a country which seems to value this, but it's not really a value because survival today is a global issue. America will not survive without recognizing that it's part of the human race. And I think our political, social, and financial structures are highly nationalistic. I see this, Britain, has to do this, that, and the other to do well. And there are lots of socio-economic and socio-political issues which I find very disturbing. I lived in the States about the Kennedy time, and I think the biggest thing that I know between then and now is that being liberal is a dirty word. And liberalism is scientific. It's being open and thinking about things. Whereas, and I think this bothers me, that something that I hold dear to the way I think, to be open and questioning and recognizing that for the world to survive, we have to work on an international level and work with people throughout the world, because what is best for America and Britain and Europe is the same as what is best for Asian countries and South African countries and South American countries. So those are the issues and I don't think they're scientific ones. I think they're socio-economic and socio-political ones. And there's something to do with dogma, accepting dogma, which is just a human construct. I think there are religious issues as much as there are political ones. And I think until we get that straight, I think we've got a very serious problem for young people in the future. And I'm worried. I mean, I used to say that I used to be an optimist. Well, Leonard Cohen said in Rolling Stone, he said, this guy said, you're a pessimist. He said, no. A pessimist, I think of a pessimist as someone who's waiting for it to rain. I'm drenched to the skin. And I say, well, I'm an optimist. Why is that? Well, I'll be well out of here when the shit really hits the fan. That's my level of optimism. And I think our young people deserve better. I think we really do have to work. We have to get leaders, and we have to take our leaders and make sure they sit down. The Obamas and the, Putin have got to come together. The Chinese leaders have got to come together. Because what sort of example is that for our young people? The Japanese and Chinese having a problem there. Netanyahu and Hamas on the other side. How can we expect a future of peace when our leaders can't sit down at the table together? And that's why I love Joe Rothblatt. I mean, he was revered by people on both sides, and Gorbachev and others who recognized how hard he worked for the non-proliferation of nuclear weapons. And something that Uwe here is working for, to bring us, to try to get people from the US and all over the world to come here and say to young people that we've got to work together, because unless we do that, we're not going to really solve the problems. It's not a scientific one. It's a socio-political, I think religious one at the present time. That's a problem, because what they believe is very important to them. But I worry about the organization that takes advantage of what they believe, the organizations that believe in conservatism or socialism and stuff like that, because these are something to do with society. And I think those aspects are taken advantage of by people at the tops of these organizations. And that's not the way it should be. But I don't have an answer I'm just waffling away here.
Thank you very much. May I have another two
something
questions?
There's a young man at the
The
back.
man at the back, please.
Okay, yes. Okay, yes.
Any
Okay.
staff could come to help him, please.
Yeah, I'm Skonchai Chanunan from Faculty of Education, and I'm specialized in chemical education. Can you hear me, Professor?
Yeah, I can hear you, but whether I can understand you is another matter.
All right.
I mean,
I'll
let
try
me tell you
as
something about getting old. I have tinnitus.
Okay.
Could you come at the front, please?
Make up to front?
Yes, please.
Okay. I'll try my best. Yeah, I'm specialized in chemical education, and I'm very interested in what should be the role for you, like a scientist, to get young people more interested in science.
Okay.
Does it?
It's much better without the microphone.
All right.
But there you go. I mean, one problem is the mic.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Okay. What I'm doing is basically shown here in this first picture, okay, which I showed you. So one thing I'm doing is I do workshops with 6 and 7 and 8-year-old children around the world. And I've done these in Japan, in Germany, the USA, dozens of them in the UK, and Malaysia, all over the world. And I'll be doing them again in Germany later in the year. To get kids to look like this, totally engrossed in something. That's one thing. But the main thing I'm doing is I'm trying to work as I did, and I showed you before, that I want young people to be creative and think about scientific issues. And which one do I want? For instance, this one. I showed you one on beetles, but here's another one on wolves by an undergraduate, okay?
Recently, the first case of inbreeding that was scientifically linked to deformities in animals was released. This study was done by John Vuccetti and Ralph Peterson with the School of Environmental Science at Michigan Technology University on a population of wolves, a very close relative of the dog. The study was conducted on a small, isolated wolf population located at Isle Royale National Park in northern Lake Superior, Michigan. The 3 packs are comprised of around 24 wolves, all descended from 1 female and 1 or 2 males, who crossed an ice bridge from Canada during an unusually cold winter in the 1940s. Since then, they have been isolated on the islands that make up the Isle Royale National Park.
Let's start with that. So these were part of my honors course at Florida State, and I asked all the students to find a little project that they were in, something that they were interested in, and make a little presentation. And this remarkable one, they were all remarkable, this was perhaps the most remarkable. This is a pack of wolves that crossed onto an island in the Great Lakes when it was a very cold winter, and the ice has never formed again, and these wolves have been isolated for 70 years. Okay? The wolves today are all related to 1 female wolf and 2 or 3 males. And this is what the study has shown.
In this population of 24 wolves, an average of only 3 pairs of wolves will breed a year. The long-term effective population size of the wolf population is approximately 3.8, and the generation time for Isle Royale wolves is about 4.3 years.
Now I'm going to jump on. I'm going to show you the results of this. Okay?
This graph shows the vertebrae defects in relation to the estimated birth date of the wolf. The number of deformities seems to increase significantly during the late 1980s. Vuccetti and Peterson noted that for the last 12 years, every one of the wolves they found dead had some sort of bone deformation. As the population becomes more inbred, the genetic diversity continues to decrease. The photograph on the left-hand side is what a normal wolf vertebrae should look like. And this photograph on the right is the defected vertebrae. Again, in this photograph, you can clearly compare and contrast.
This is the thing. Now, the way to do it is to take students and let them do what interests them. I think education today is a problem because governments and government committees decide what you should know. Yeah, you've got to know something. There's definitely have to have a groundwork of knowledge, but you also have to know something else. One is that to find something interesting, and Jennifer found this fantastic study where now 100% of these wolves have massive problems in their vertebrae. Now then, she goes on, however, and this is the thing, not just finding that, she goes on to put what she's interested in, okay?
I realize that probably not that many people are interested in conservation biology, but where this subject hits home to many is in their puppy dogs. The idea that inbreeding causes deformities in animals is an issue between animal lovers and breeders. Recently, breeding facilities that produce purebred puppies in large quantities, called puppy mills, have been charged with selling unhealthy and defected dogs. Part of my motivation for choosing this topic is my love of animals. I want everyone to be aware of the atrocities that occur at puppy mills.
Let's stop it here. So the thing is not just to say, here's, go on, look for a project and find it interesting. It's to now take that project and put your own spin on it and add something to this. And she is particularly angry about the inbreeding and the forced breeding that we have in puppy mills, okay? But this is the interesting part. Not only did she produce something very interesting for me of this amazing study, a 70-year study in inbreeding, which you'll never be able to repeat. You will not be allowed to repeat, okay, because it would be unethical. But anyway, that's the situation. And then the big advantage is that, as I showed you before, is that if you get out of here and go to this one, basically, then there is Jennifer, and she's just got into vet school. There's every advantage. So the way to do it is to encourage young people like you to, in your spare time, really, because these were somewhat spare time projects, do something that fascinates you, that's a scientific project. Make a presentation, which we're setting up, I think, here in the school that we went to, in the Shrewsbury School, because we were there this morning, where they're very keen to do this for their students, and for you to realize that this is the future. So it's basically finding some way of encouraging your creative potential within the sciences, but not just the sciences, something that you personally are interested in.
Thank you very much. Let's ask for the last question for Professor Kroto, please.
Hi. Thank you very much for your great lecture. Actually, this is the second time that I attended your lecture, and you still got very high quality.
Yeah.
Well, do you agree that we trying too much to put the academic knowledge to our student, and then that's gonna interfere the creativity and also imagination? How you do you have any idea for us to do that to solve that problem, please?
Yeah. Well, I think I did address it. I think the problem is not teaching you what to think, but how to think. And you can only do that by example. And I think within the sciences and within universities, it's absolutely vital that the student, undergraduate students, spend time in the research labs. Because you don't learn how to think from a book. From a book, you can learn what is known. What you need and what is important is that for students in schools as well, is that, and we've got some examples of an amazing woman who's about 15 in high school, but she went to a local university and worked in the research labs. And you learn how to think and how to do research and how to be creative by being in an environment that is creative. And in fact, if you think about the old masters, Leonardo da Vinci, I think worked in Piero della Francesca's studio. So in the old days, there were apprenticeships. And those apprenticeships were that, apprentices would work in the studio of the master and would paint some things and gradually become, in some case, better than the master. And the research work is something similar to that, where you have a research scientist who creates a research group, and you work in that, and you work as a community. And science today is a communal activity. The days are really long gone in experimental science where you work by yourself. It's too difficult and complicated, and the equipment's sometimes very complex and requires people with different types of ability. And so I think the emphasis should be far more on hands-on in the schools, which I think is happening. That little boy is totally engrossed in what they're doing, and that's so beautiful to see them working away, all of them working away and trying to construct these things. But you have to be in an environment where research is being carried out. And you learn this like a process of osmosis. From the surrounding, it comes in, and you don't understand it's happening, but it is happening. And then the emotions come in, the discussions come in. This is wrong, where you work together, and something happens unexpectedly. So I think there is too much emphasis on what a committee decides you should know, and there should be more emphasis on working somehow as an apprenticeship. And in research, that's the case. And listening to people who have been successful, and by and large, it's not to do with academic sort of thing. It's something to do with attitude that is passed on from a teacher to a student.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Professor.
So let's give him another big round of applause, please. So thank you very much. I feel today very fortunate and honored to have joined this event, and especially to have listened to such a wonderful lecture from him.
Definitely, Dr. Chianin, I also feel the same. And now, Dr. Chianin, I think we have reached the end of this event.
Yes, but before we leave, may I please take this opportunity to give great thanks to our big sponsors.
First, Jackie Chan Charitable Foundation, Mercedes-Benz, Thai Airways International Public Limited Company,
and Millennium Hilton Bangkok Hotel.
And without all of them, the Narayanan University staff, with all their hard work, without them, we couldn't have such a great event today.
And of course, thank you all participants, academics, lecturers, and students, and Thao Ngam Networks for coming here today. Thank you very much indeed.
It's time to say goodbye and see you next year in the 5th ASEAN series.
ท่านผู้บริหารคณาจารย์จากเครือข่ายทองงามนะคะเดี๋ยวเราเป็นเชิญท่านนะคะร่วมถ่ายรูปเป็นที่ระลึกด้วยนะคะอย่าเพิ่งไป
melanoma.